Hello and welcome to Retech, and today we're going to do something slightly different. It's probably going to be split up into a couple of parts because I got a feeling it might be a little bit on the long side, but it's all in a good cause. So I've kind of been thinking lately about all of the machines that I've actually repaired, put right, recommissioned and so on over the past few years and so on, you know, and it's kind of got me thinking about things in a slightly different way. You see, those of you who have been following this, they'll know that I've done quite a few clone machines, either hardware based, such as physical Z80 processor based, or emulated based, you know, using Raspberry Pis and so on, and Arduinos for keyboard interfaces and all that kind of thing. So if you haven't seen them, just have a look back. There's a big kind of chunk on emulated computers that I've done over the past, and they've been fantastic. So I kind of got thinking about the other things that have been not quite emulated, but you know, FPGAs and software emulation, hardware revisions, new boards and so on. And I kind of think it would be nice for me to try and get hold of as many as possible, or even build as many as possible if I can. So I started digging out my old kit, and I realized that some of the machines I haven't used for a number of years. There's one which I built up and repaired. It's one of the early ones I did, was a ZX Spectrum, and I decided to build it into a new keyboard and case and all this kind of thing, but not a normal one, an aftermarket one, and then do a composite mod on. Again, there's videos on how we did the composite mod on the ZX Spectrum and what we did to this machine. And I kind of just dug it out, had a look at it, and it got me thinking. Now, it got me thinking because the ZX Spectrum, when they were current, and the ZX81 for that matter, always had a kind of vibrant aftermarket scene, really, because people wanted to upgrade them, make them better, improve them and so on. A lot of people like them as standard, but there's a lot of people who didn't like the keyboard, and because of that people added new keyboards, joystick ports and so on, and they kind of got away from it being a ZX Spectrum into a more of a personalized machine, more of a machine that you wanted to use and a machine that you wanted to have and own. And it's kind of the way with these emulated machines or recreated machines, whether it's in hardware or FPGA, because people are buying them because they want something different. They want that kind of nostalgic kick, but they want everything that they probably couldn't afford when they were kids, when these were out. Because you've got to remember that a lot of these machines were taken to the hearts by children, really, children aged from 8, 9, 10, 11 and up. And although there were a lot of adults who got them, it was the children that kind of got the ball rolling. And you know, I was kind of from that generation, but as a child you didn't have the kind of money to splash around that you do when you a little bit later on in your adult life, when you're working and you've saved and this is something you want to do. So that's why I built the ZX Spectrum in question, which is this one here. It's a ZX Spectrum 48K with a composite mod at the back, so you get a nice clear picture, and it's got a cracking keyboard. This is actually the second keyboard. I've got two of these. The first version doesn't have space for the interface one in the back, and it doesn't, or rather it doesn't have the cutout. It's got plenty of space, and it doesn't have a full-size spacebar. It has the normal ZX Spectrum spacebar, but what they did is they kind of cut a few costs on the keyboard, because the other one has a nicer feel, but this one's nice. It seems really nice to use. And there you go, you can see how nice it is to type on. It's much better, much quicker to use than what a standard keyboard on a ZX Spectrum. Plus it has a number pad, which is a bonus, because not everything back then had a number pad. They tend to have been cut off about here, so you just had the keyboard. Now Now I remember when I had my ZX81, I really wanted a keyboard to go with it, but they were more than the cost, or just about the cost, of a ZX81. And these DK-Tronics keyboards were relatively more expensive because they were encased, whereas some of the ZX81 keyboards was just literally the keyboard on a cable which plugged into the keyboard port on your ZX81 onto the motherboard itself. But they were very, very good quality for what they were. Now this is a machine that I really wanted when I was a kid. I definitely couldn't afford it to get it up to this spec with your snapshot on the back, your joystick interface, a composite mod with a decent television. You remember you had to use a kind of a portable TV at the time. If you were lucky, you might have got a monitor. And also, you know, it's got a nice keyboard on it and plenty of space underneath to put the power supply in the box. But I've actually got away from the power supply because it was literally one of these inside of the case, stripped out of its case. I always thought that was kind of dangerous, so I never did that. I had that plugged in to the board here. But now I've replaced it with a very small modern power supply, which is much more reliable, and it's just a cable that plugs in the back. There's no heavy chunky brick, and it just has a small power adapter about that big which plugs into your wall, so it's no big deal. So yeah, and the reason why I'm going over this is because this is one of my favorite Spectrums, really, because it's original, but having it enclosed in here makes it a lot nicer to use, and it feels a lot like a kind of BBC Micro in the way its keys work and the extra space on the back, etc. So it gives it a bit more of an upmarket appearance. Now, and the reason why I'm telling you this is because some of the clones that I've done recently for the ZX Spectrum are based around a Raspberry Pi and a recreated ZX Spectrum, the way it looked and felt, that I thought it was a bit wasted just being a Bluetooth keyboard. So, you know, you may have seen this. This is an original size ZX Spectrum, and you can see how much smaller it is than the DK-Tronics keyboard. There were other alternatives such as the Saga Emperor keyboard, which basically what it used was the bottom half of the Spectrum case screwed to the bottom of it, and then the keyboard plugged in, so you just got this part of the keyboard. But I kind of like them, but I think this is a much nicer setup, although it is a bit on the chunky side now when you're used to very slimline keyboards, because it even makes the Commodore 64 look very slim in its profile. But this is your recreated ZX Spectrum. It's based on a Raspberry Pi. It's got a Raspberry Pi in the back here, and all of the other functions still work. So if I wanted to use it as a Bluetooth keyboard, that's really easy to do. You know, it's a little bit of tight wiring in there. It's very tight inside this case, even though the Raspberry Pi is quite small. It's quite deep with its extra USB ports on, which you do not need, because what I've done is I've built in an SD card in here which has got every bit of software on that I could ever want. So this is it. This is done. HDMI, audio out if you want it, and that's it. Little micro USB power, and that's it. But it's a very good machine. Now you can obviously see how much more professional this actually looks and feels than this, but I could, and I actually might do one day, is to build one of these into a similar case like this. But to be honest, I think I'm just going to leave it because I like the way that looks and feels, and it's not meant to be anything other than a ZX Spectrum, although it will do 1 to 8 plus 2 plus 3 and so on. I just like the actual nostalgic form factor that this one is, because I have built one of these, and you'll see my review on these if you have a look for the Harlequin ZX Spectrum, and this is the 48K model built into a Plus case. The keyboards on the Plus I've never particularly been fond of. They just not very nice to type on, but they give more space and they allow more room to breathe, as in for the boards to ventilate the boards, than the smaller cases. So that's why I chose a plus case, and it's a very nice machine. The little 48K Harlequin here, it's a very, very nice machine, and it's very stable, and it runs 100% of the games that I've ever tried on it. There may be some it doesn't run, but I haven't found one yet, but I'm sure there will be some issue somewhere along the line. But so far, 100% more reliable and 100% compatible from what I've tried. The next one I built was this one, and as you can see, it has the 128K mark on it, because I believe this was originally a Portuguese 128 ZX Spectrum. Okay, so it was a dead ZX Spectrum, and I just bought it as a case because somebody had whopped a 48K motherboard in the case and then basically butchered it. So I would have rather have left the original board in, because I would probably been able to fix it, but they've been that long ago. So yeah, this is the Harlequin 128, and you can tell by the colours on the back. Again, it's much nice. It's a nice machine. It's much more convenient than the ZX version, the Sinclair version rather, because it's got composite built in, it's much more reliable, and it's also got options for other machines such as Jupiter Ace, all of the models of the ZX Spectrum, and it does a lot more than this, including the 9 tiles ROM set, etc. So it's a very good machine. Now I have a 128, but it's sadly not working at the moment. I haven't really had time to get around to doing it, so this has been my kind of stand-in 128 for a long time. But this is kind of leading up to what I'd like to cover, so I thought, well, is there anything out there that's better than this, or this, or in a way better than one of my favourite Spectrums in its current case? So I've started looking around, and there's plenty. There's the Omni, which is based on the Harlequin, so I can't see it being much different to this machine here. And then there's the Engo, which is basically a cost-reduced Spectrum Next, and it comes in a standard case, although, you know, a lot of people swap out the case and keyboards for ones they've found online, which are very expensive at 250 euros or more, just for a keyboard like this, although it's slimmer and it just kind of looks about the same footprint as a Spectrum Plus 128 or Spectrum Plus. But I'm not sure about the Spectrum Next. I've never been sure about the Spectrum Next. I think there's not going to be a huge, as in massive, software base for it when you compare it to the other models that are out there, because you've got to think a standard 48K model has 3,500 to 4,000 software titles out for it, okay, officially, or rather official estimates. That doesn't include the 128K models that came out with extra software and extra programs that came out for them, and it doesn't include the fact that you could run all of this software for all of these machines on a clone machine, such as a Russian clone. There's lots of those. There's lots of Portuguese clones, and there was lots of clones from Ukraine. So, you know, you've got a massive software base for software for the 48K and the 128K model. So so I thought, well, what's going to be the best way of doing an incremental upgrade? Maybe from one of these. So that kind of rules out the Omni, because the Omni is just one of these, okay? So I'm going to kind of skip by the Omni because of that. But then I started searching, and I found one of these, okay? It's in a shiny packet at the moment. This is one of the very first ones that I've never built myself. I haven't built myself, but I'll leave it in there until I actually put the machine together, because that's what I'm going to do next. But what it is, it's a ZX SiZif 5112. It's a CPLD based Spectrum clone. So basically it's kind of an sort of build and pitched as an alternative, and a more cost-effective alternative to the ZX Spectrum next. It's based on the EPM 1270 CPLD and has the added advantage of having a real AY8910 sound chip, and it's all in this little board, and it's also got a Z80 based processor on it as well. And it's designed to fit in a rubber case, 48K case, but they reckon it's kind of a tight fit, and I can kind of see it because if you see sat on top of here, there's not a lot of space in width wise. So, and also it's probably a little bit taller because of the interfaces they use on the back than the ZX Spectrum was as well. So yeah, I can see it probably be better off in a Plus case, but I'm not keen on the Plus keyboard. I mean, I get used to it, I like it, I've used it for years, but I'd rather have something a little different, even if I'd probably rather have the rubber keyed Spectrum in that, if I could get it to fit properly and to breathe properly. Because I also bought with it the Wi-Fi module as well, and the Bluetooth module, so that's going to squeeze down on space a little bit inside of one of these cases. Okay, so I'll need to modify the case anyway, and because it's got a joystick port, a reset port, and a couple of what they call magic buttons on the rear, and it's also got a built-in SD card, so it gives you the option of loading from not just the SD card but tape as well. It's got Spectrum 128 and Spectrum 48K timings, so the specs on this board are quite decent. It's a real Z80 running at 3.5 megahertz, 4.4 megahertz, 5.2 megahertz and 7 megahertz with no weight turbo on it, and it's got a 14 megahertz option with weight states. It comes with 512k of RAM, and it's got switchable stereo. It's quite a well spec'd up board. It's got Sega 6-button joystick import, Kempster and Sinclair modes as well, with the integrated SD or DIV MMC, and it's got a Z controller, one micro SD socket, PAL, RGB video out via a Sega Star Mini 9 or Mini DIN 9 connector. It also has digital output header for EGA monitors, VGA scan doublers. It has ULA Plus mono Covox Pentagon, which is a standard, sound drive 4-channel stereo for Covox, Wi-Fi for BBS access, tape input via 3.5-inch jack, but it's also got Bluetooth though, so you can actually just type load as normal and then use your mobile phone to send the relevant software to it, and it runs off a standard 9 to 12 volt power supply, and it doesn't care about the polarity as well, so which is good. And one other thing, it's got a keyboard PS2 interface on the PCB, which is a 4-pin jumper, but you would need to solder on your own PS2 connector. So yeah, that's the biggest reason for doing this little bit. What should I do with it? Because I have nice clones here, and they've done me really well over the past few years. This one was built 3 years ago almost, and it's been a mainstay along with the 128K Harlequin as well, because you can run both 48 and 128K modes, and with it not being in a plus 2A and plus 2 and plus 3 case, it's actually got the correct legends on the keys, so you can use 48K mode on this if you wanted to do any 48K programming as well. And that's the same for the ZX Spectrum clone up here as well, the standard 48K model, and it's also the same for a standard Spectrum in a modified case or a new case. So what do I do with this? Do I build it up into a slimline case, put it in a Plus case, which I'm not particularly happy with the keyboard, because I do use them, you see, and I find that the keyboards are quite annoying, and they do differ from machine to machine, because this one's nicer than this one. I think it depends on the membrane that's underneath them as well, or whether it's got a metal backing to it or a plastic, later plastic one. So the metal one seems a lot more robust and it has a nicer feel to it. But yeah, I've got another one of these cases as well, which is here. I have another DK-Tronics case without the space bar, but it's in really good condition. It's also got a little switch for power that I could utilize as well. But also, you can tell by the connection, these DK-Tronics ones were very well built, and they had nice connectors on, none of the flimsy rubbish that you got inside of the original Spectrum case, you know. So, and as you can see, it's a proper soldered individual key switch keyboard as well, which the early ones, which also run fine in the ZX81, sound nicer than the later ones. So they actually use nicer quality key switches in the early ones. So that's my bit of a dilemma. So I'm going to build this up and see if it actually does work. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to power it on, clear all of this away, power it on. I'm going to use the DK-Tronics keyboard that you just seen just to plug something into it. And we're going to have a quick look at what it can do. I'm going to have a bit of a think about which direction I want to go. So I might go down this route. I like this. I like this. And I could put a +1 inside of it, have some micro drives on it just for because I can. Have it all housed in a single case, have a MIDI interface on it as well with a pass-through, and use it for other things other than games, because I used to when they were current. I wasn't a massive games player. I was more of a what can we do with these, what can we make them do type of person, rather than an out and out gamer. So let's have a quick look at this ZiF after now I've had my ramble. I know you'll have your own comments, so it'd be nice to see them put down the bottom on the video to see what you would do. And I might get hold of a Spectrum Next, because I like the Spectrum Next as a concept, but I kind of thought that they were overpriced, and I also thought that because they were overpriced as well, they weren't going to get into the market as much. It was only going to be diehards, and a lot of them came up for sale shortly afterwards. And whether it was people trying to make money or people just thinking, well, I've got a Spectrum and it does most of what I want that this thing can do anyway. So I don't know. So I'm probably going to get a Next at some point to have a bit of a play with. So, but now I want to see what this thing can do. So let's have a look. Okay, so we've cleared away the desk. We've got these packages out here. I've got my drink in the corner. And these are the bits that you didn't see. We have that's your Wi-Fi adapter in there. We're not going to do this today, because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to test out the board, see what it does, see if it works. I'm sure it does, hopefully. And then what we're going to do is we're going to build the machine up probably later on. And then we have the Bluetooth adapter as well, which I think's going to come in much more handy than the Wi-Fi adapter, because you can download your software from your phone. And in this bag we have a PS2 adapter for a PS2 keyboard, and we also have your SCART adapter. SCART's fairly common in the UK and Europe, so we're just going to open up this, and it was quite a good standard. Okay, so what we have here is the PS2 adapter, and there's your PS2 little socket. Now I think modifying whichever case I use to have both options, okay, so I think that would be a nice little idea. So that's something else I'm going to try later. So onto the main attraction really is this. So we're just going to open it. And there we go, there's the board itself in all of its glory. We've got two little push switches on here, which I think they will probably do the main menu, and also the div MMC, which is on board on here. So we have a div MMC just here with an SD card already in it. It did say he was going to put the initial image on it and, you know, some various sort of kind of demo stuff so we could have a look at it. So that's nice. At the moment I've set it at 14 megahertz, but what we're going to do is we're going to change this. We're going to basically walk you through these options here. You can change the speed from anything from 3.5 up to 14 megahertz. We'll just leave it at 3.5. The machine is a Spectrum 128 at the moment. We'll just leave it at that for the moment. You can change it to the various spectrums. The next is your joystick interface. We've got Kemp's and Sinclair, so it's up to you whichever joystick you're going to use. Your 48K ROM or the LG and OpenSC ROMs, which we'll cover later on. Okay, so we'll leave it as default. We'll leave it on the SD card. The ULA Plus, we'll leave that on. We'll just basically try and leave it all standard at the moment, okay? Digital audio is Covox and SD, and then in the advanced, we have SD indication, which is on the board. We've got Bright Boost. We'll leave these as standard for now. We'll leave all the other ZX kits as they are, okay? So we'll go back to go back. And what we're going to do is we're going to run a demo at 3.5 megahertz. Really, this is just to see if there's any real difference, you see, because a lot of them there isn't. So we're going to exit the system, leave it on standard, press return. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the menu. So I'm going to scroll down and then I'm going to find a demo from roughly 2000, so one of the later demos, and we'll see what the difference is. There we go, we'll go to that one, Chaos Construction from 2000, okay? So we're going to run that demo now. As you can see, it looks really good, it looks really slick. Okay, it just gives you an idea of what the actual graphics look like on 3.5 megahertz, okay? So we're just going to stop it there. What we're going to do this time is change it to 14 megahertz, okay? We're going to go down at the bottom, leave everything else the same, and then we're just going to go back into the menu and run that demo. Exactly the same demo, no different. It's quite apparent it's a lot faster, and the timing for the music is exactly the same though. And it's much, much slicker. It's like this was intended to run like this. This is much smoother than what it is on 3.5 megahertz. This is 14 megahertz. This is running really, really quickly. Really quickly. The music doesn't struggle. The graphics don't struggle. What a difference. Okay, so far we've just gone through a few little bits and pieces on this board. I'm not going to go too much in depth with it because what I'm going to do is I'll probably do that on the next video, because what I want to do is I want to build something up that really makes this board kind of shine, because so far I'm very impressed by it. Right, we've got RoboCop 1, okay? We're going to leave it in standard Spectrum mode, okay? Okay, you can see how fast it's going, how it's scrolling, and the way the music's playing. So you get a good idea of how it actually looks. Okay, so you can see the speed it's scrolling and how it reacts. Okay, so what we'll do now is we'll reset it. Always do a reset. Go into the menu, and what we're going to do is we're going to change that to, let's just jump to 5.2 megahertz, okay? We'll not go silly straight off the bat, okay? So we're going to, and then we'll basically load up RoboCop again. And then we'll see what difference it does running at 5.2 megahertz. You can almost hear it straight away. The sound's running faster, and so is the speech. I quite prefer it like this. It's kind of NTSC speeds, if it, you know, you ever got an NTSC Spectrum. Okay, so we've got keyboard. It's a bit fast, but let's see if it makes any difference on the gameplay. So you can tell the scrolling's faster, the music's faster, everything about it's quicker. I think it kind of makes the game a little bit more playable, to be fair. Because everything reacts a lot smoother. And it does make a lot of difference. So it'll be an ideal platform to smooth out some of the games that seem to struggle a little bit on the original CPU speed of the ZX Spectrum. Because you can see here, just over 5 megahertz does make a big difference. So it does work. So if we go back and then we change the CPU speed again, let's go all the way to the maximum now. So we'll we'll do 14, and then we'll find RoboCop again. You couldn't even hear the speech there. But as you can tell, the music hasn't jumped up. Now, I think if you play around with the speed settings, you'll find a happy medium, because I think the wait states on this different processor settings, speed settings, actually have a big effect, as I said, on the timing for a lot of the music. So let's try it out. Again, it's just a bit hit and miss because the speech is wrong. I think you'd have to be a bit of... Yeah, and the timing of this music as well on the game is actually using the CPU clock cycle, so it's virtually unplayable at this speed, but you can see the difference. It's hugely fast. Yeah, so it's hugely fast. It becomes unusable because the games are written around a certain clock speed, but I think budging up to about 4 megahertz is going to make a lot of difference. It's not going to interfere too much with the sound, and the timing, as you can hear here, this bit's playing very nicely. I don't have many complaints about this board at all. Okay, so what I think of this board when I compare it to the Harlequin, my mainstay of Spectrum 48s and 128s that I've had for a little bit of time now, and it's the machines I actually built myself, so you know, I've got a bit more time invested in them. But that doesn't mean that this machine isn't good. In fact, this version of a clone of a ZX Spectrum is a step up in some ways to the Harlequin board. It's got a faster processor, so you can whack it up to 14 megahertz, which it does do the job. You can see the instant difference, so it's not kind of pseudo fake-ish kind of processor doubling. It's actually 14 megahertz, or it appears to be anyway. It's got some nice features on it. It has quite nice sound. The using a genuine AY sound chip really does make a difference, instead of kind of creating it in software or FPGA or something similar. And this board I'm quite impressed with. Not so sure whether I'll use the PS2 connector, as I said, but you know, a lot of people will. They'll plug in a PS2 keyboard and house it in a little plastic box behind it, and then you've got a nice little system. The edge connector I have yet to check to see if it actually does work in the same way as it does on the Spectrum. Judging by the board, I don't have any doubt. It's very well designed. I've had it on for 27 hours just soaking it, making sure everything's fine, it's not going to pop before I just decide to install it in different cases, etc. And it doesn't get warm really, it doesn't cause any issues, it doesn't overheat, it doesn't crash, it basically sits there ticking away quite happily. So yeah, the Wi-Fi module will be interesting, the Bluetooth module will be very handy. I've got a 48K standard Spectrum that I've put a Bluetooth module in for loading and saving games, and that works absolutely brilliantly straight off my mobile phone. So I think I did do a video about on quite a while ago, and if you have a look you'll see a white ZX Spectrum 48K model with a Bluetooth system there. So yeah, I haven't got as much time invested in this as I have on my others because it was pre-built, which is good because I then didn't have to spend the time building it, and I've got a lot more time to play around with it and enjoy the machine. So what are my next steps? Well, my next steps is to get a case and a keyboard for it. Now, I did think about housing it in a Sinclair 48K case, cut the back out, make it all match the ports, but I'm kind of having second thoughts on that. You see, having used the DK-Tronics keyboards with this machine, it kind of makes sense to put this machine in a case with a tactile decent keyboard. See, you see, I've got Harlequin 48K plus models in a plus case, etc. I've got a recreated 48K model which is in a 48K rubber keyed case with everything that I'd probably ever need to play on it, and that's really good. But I haven't got a machine that's housed in a keyboard with proper tactile keys. And other 48K plus models, people say, well, they're proper keys. Well, they're not. They kind of jam and stick together. They're not brilliant to type on. The QL keyboard was much better than the Plus keyboard, but you know, that's just the way it was, and that's a kind of thing about cost cutting. So yeah, I'm undecided on what I'm going to do with it case wise, keyboard wise, but I've got a few options, and that's probably going to be my next step. My next step is to, because this is turning out to be quite long with everything about the reasons and why I did it, the next step really is to put it in a nice case, get the Wi-Fi module working, on the Bluetooth module working. I think it supports VGA, but I think the VGA has to have a specific refresh frequency on the monitors themselves, which I need to have a quick check in, but you know, I'm going to have a look at all that very shortly. This is just to say this is what this is all about. So am I pleased with it so far? Yes. Do I think it's going to replace the Harlequins. Possibly. I mean, the way it's going, yeah, I think all three of them are going to be used. I don't use the 48K version of the Harlequin that often, but the 128K version in its Portuguese style 128 case, I think it's a Portuguese case because of the different colour lettering. I'm just looking at it on the shelf there. That's on it compared to the UK with its red 128 badging and all this kind of thing. So, I use that one a lot. So would I trade in a vintage Spectrum for one of any of these recreated ones? Well, maybe. If I had a vintage Spectrum that I was unsure of because it was getting a bit ropey, then I would go for one of these recreated hardware models any day of the week. Would I go down the software route? Well, time with the version I did on the recreated ZX Spectrum as a standard 48K model, I would even consider the emulation route because I haven't really found anything that's put me off of it yet. So yeah, so there's kind of horses and courses, swings and roundabouts. I do like original hardware, but I can also see the merit in recreating them for longevity. So anyway, this has been a bit of a long one about the board I've just bought, and I hope that you've enjoyed this as much as I've had playing with it. There's a little bit more to come on this model. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope you've enjoyed this long one about the recreated or emulated or remodeled ZX Spectrums, depends on which way you want to look at it. And I think these clones are fascinating. I think they're really good extension to the ZX Spectrum family, whether or not you've got an original or not. These are really handy to have, and it adds longevity into the Spectrum life. So these will probably outlast some of the original hardware, and that's always going to be a good thing because it will keep the ZX Spectrum kind of running somewhere, or its equivalent running somewhere at some point throughout kind of the next 30-40 years or so. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. Please subscribe and I'll speak to you soon. Thanks a lot for watching. See you soon. Bye bye.